Who Framed Roger Rabbit? You've seen the movie, you know the story. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? You know, the back of the box assumes we've all seen the movie. So, have we?
I've seen it like once when I was a kid. I remember almost nothing about it.
I haven't seen it at all. I mean, I've seen clips. I don't know, when people talk about it with like pictures. So like, you know, I know what he looks like, and I know who Jessica Rabbit is.
Of course you do.
But yeah. But other than that, like, I don't really know too much.
All right. Well, I love this movie. I also love Robert Zemeckis. This is another Robert Zemeckis joint. And also, Robert Zemeckis also made Back to the Future. So, I mean, we have two LJN-produced movie video games that were both Robert Zemeckis style movies. This is interesting. There's a lot of crossover here.
Wasn't like one of the bits of trivia from Back to the Future that Robert Zemeckis hated it? Like, hated the video game version
of Back to the Future?
Actively hated the Back to the Future movie. I'm sorry, game.
Yeah, Back to the Future, the movie, the game.
Oh, well, he probably played it.
Maybe I'm just misremembering.
Yeah, I don't remember that piece of trivia, so I will try to find a source for that and put in the show notes if I can, but that's interesting. I doubt Robert Zemeckis was playing video games. He was pumped. This was his, like, you know, legendary run of movies from, like, 1985 all the way to...
Well, I mean, that's not to say that he was playing them, but I'm sure, like, he was aware that a game was being made.
Well, maybe he was just mad that so many of the games of his movies had nothing to do with the movies themselves. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm telling a different story. You're telling the story of my characters doing other things that they don't do in my movies.
Yeah, I mean, it also could be that Back to the Future game was just, like, definitively a bad game.
Well, the one thing I remember from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the movie, not the video game that we'll get into in a minute, is that there is a scene in that movie where Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse are together in the same shot. And, like, for me, I just had to call that out here on the show because that was like I didn't think that could be done. I didn't understand that was possible. But that's when I learned to love our corporate overlords for giving us the much needed crossover that now we just get all the time. Any two pop culture characters that we want, put them together. It's a multiverse.
I'm still waiting for a live-action Batman and Iron Man movie, so I think that'd be fun.
Soon enough.
Never.
You know, Marvel vs. DC is only like 30 years away. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the game, is based on the movie, but maybe not if you ask Robert Zemeckis, but it's a action-adventure game where the player controls private detective Eddie Valliant, accompanied by Roger Rabbit, who you do not get to play as at all. You must find clues and items that help you progress the story and find out, you guessed it, who framed Roger Rabbit. Sounds like an okay game to me, but didn't you guys want to play as Roger Rabbit? Didn't you think you were going to play as Roger Rabbit?
I mean,
I don't know.
Like I said, I haven't seen the movie in a long time, but isn't this other guy the detective? Isn't he like the actual main character?
Yes. Okay, but yeah, sure, he's the main character, but this is a children's game now, and
it's
like,
a children's
you
movie.
think it. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No?
I beg to differ there.
Okay.
No, I'm just thinking like the NES is like a children's console.
Well,
here's
here's the question that I have. Would you rather be Roger Rabbit or hang out with Roger Rabbit? Like, it's not. I don't think that like Roger Rabbit is like, oh, men want to be him, but he might be fun
Sean.
to hang out with, and that's exactly what this is simulating here. He just sort of like follows you around and. What?
I'll tell you why, because think about it like this. Would you rather be Sonic the Hedgehog or hang out with Sonic
the Hedgehog? Does not translate to Roger Rabbit.
No, listen.
I will tell you though. Translate.
Listen, one fan made a game where you just hang out with Sonic the Hedgehog in your apartment.
True.
And he progressively does creepier and creepier things to you. And that's what you just made me think of with Roger Rabbit. I'd rather play as him in some wacky platformer that is inspired by like the opening short with him and the baby who turns out to be like a 40-year-old man. I don't know if you guys haven't seen the movie, so it doesn't matter. But that's like the opening sketch is like, oh, Roger Rabbit is actually like a famous cartoon character in this universe, and he makes the movies in the cartoons in this toon world. And I thought, like, you could do that as like a platformer or like a Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle style game. But instead, they decided to take the route that the movie totally takes, so it's fair. I just don't know how much fun it is to be the private detective and then just have Roger Rabbit follow you around, but not even like closely follow you. He just kind of has his own mind and doesn't really interact with much of anything.
Well, here's where I want to just kind of argue my point here. The difference between Roger Rabbit and Sonic is that Sonic has like, he's fast. He has powers. He does things. Whereas Roger Rabbit, as far as I can tell, is somebody that has mostly just absorbed knowledge of Who Framed Roger Rabbit through, like, I don't know, pop culture retrospectives. It seems like he's just like a dude, like a dude cartoon, and like more like an actor. Is that the case?
Yes to the actor, but I wouldn't say he's just like a guy living in that universe. He just takes on like the trope of a Bugs Bunny, a Mickey Mouse, a Woody Woodpecker, just like the lead person who can do it all.
Okay. I don't know. I guess if we're going for a mystery and solving it, I would probably go with like the actual detective, unless it was called Detective Roger Rabbit, which might be another thing in an alternate universe.
Well, so I'm thinking of like how I would have reacted as a kid in 1989 when this came out, and I feel like, yes, if we were talking like a platformer or something, I'd want it to be like the colorful, crazy cartoony Roger Rabbit. But like my like 8-year-old brain would be like, oh, like I want to be the detective, like I want to be this cool guy and like have to protect the like goofy cartoon character because I'm too cool for cartoons. Like, I feel like I would be, for that age, you might actually benefit from not being the cartoon character.
So they tried to make it true to the story of the movie, like finding clues to figure out who framed Roger Rabbit. As a detective in this game, how do you find these clues? Because remember, this isn't Rockstar's LA Noir. You're not going around and interrogating people and doing like, custom speech dialogue to get proper answers and stuff like that.
Mike?
This is a game where ultimately the detective part of it, like the mystery solving part, to me, I don't even know where to start because it's just so bizarre for a child's video game based on a hit movie to take the most, the hardest route to getting around to the answers.
Mike, can you help me?
No, there is nothing in this building.
I didn't know what you were doing for a second there. I was like, is Sean okay?
It's so, like, humiliating, being a detective in this game. It's just like, oh, can you help me? And that's all you ask. That's all you can ask. And there's like, there's nothing in this building. It's like, check the drawers, please. Like, that's what being a detective is like in this game. And then you find stuff just by sheer brute force, pretty much. That's what my experience was, at least.
Yeah, but at least you only have to wait like 11 seconds while you search each. Well, if you want to search the desk, yeah, you'll search for 11 seconds. You gotta just sit there.
Well, it's very realistic, yes.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, what you do is you as the detective are on the streets of Toontown and you go into a building and you immediately like find a person or a stray cat that wants to kill you. But say you find the person first, you press the A button only once. Don't you dare press it twice or you will cancel the dialogue option between you and the other NPC. However, if you do manage to have the conversation, it is just what Sean asked me earlier, and there are only 3 possible answers. There's either the building is empty, the building has something, or search the drawers. And that might prove to be like, okay, great, like that's how you find out. That's a valid strategy for finding out if there's anything in these worth your time in these buildings. But every single time the game resets which buildings have which items and where they are. The only way to ever play this game from start to finish is that you must go into every building, and at least you could just, I guess, not ask anybody and just explore everything, but you have to ask at least one person in each building, hey, is there anything in here? And they just say no. It's like, what is the point of that? Why randomize everything if it just comes down to a simple, like, speech test against the NPCs?
Look, I'll say that, on the surface, well, first of all, yes, I agree. None of this is executed well at all. The gameplay loop when it comes to this part is not fun. Just, there's no other way to put it. But I'll say that on the surface, or on paper rather, I get, like, I can see a world where this is okay, because it's just a means to get you around town. It's like a little bit of a MacGuffin, or whatever you want to call it. Like, that's just like, yeah, this is what gets you into building a building where, like, other crap happens that's, like, exciting or whatever. Like, these things will attack you, or you gotta answer these dumb jokes or whatever. But it's like, I get that as being like, well, this gameplay loop could work if
it needs to be contextualized.
Everything else worked perfectly with it, and it wasn't quite so tedious. Like, maybe have like 1 or 2 things to search in each building if you're going to do it this way. Just let you search it. You don't have to wait for realism's sake. And then you have to definitely have like enough exciting things going on between that makes like the search feel exciting.
Yeah, I mean, right now, what we're playing in this game is the template. Like, there's no reason why anything is in any building. There's no context. There's no dramatic force. Like, we're playing the how to. It's like, hi, my name is Love Interest, and I'm going to guide you to plot point 2. And that's exactly like, if this game were the story, that's how it would be written out. And that means that it's all, like, I felt like what I was doing was completely useless because there was nothing mysterious about this detective story. It was just, I have to click on everything pretty much. And that's how you solve things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to follow up on what Joe was saying, if they said that there was something in the building, so that you knew, like, okay, yeah, this is why they randomize it, because sometimes and every building's completely different, right? Not the case in this game, but let's pretend in a different game, every building will be different, so you never know which challenging thing you're gonna have to get X item in Y building, because you don't want to deal with that challenge this time for a reset of your game. Instead, once you find out that there's something in the building, it's just on the freaking floor, and you pick it up and you leave. It's not even like there's some kind of challenge or things specific to only that building or a location or something like that. Even when they tell you, yeah, exactly. When they tell you search the drawers or search around or whatever, I was thinking like, oh, there's this little mouse hole, like that. Maybe there's something in there. And I was thinking like, oh, I'm thinking ahead of the game. Like they designed that really well. It's noticeable. I'm going to search in the mouse hole and something funny is going to happen. And it's just, there's nothing here. Well, then don't even make it an option then.
Each interactable object in this game is like a less interesting equivalent of flushable toilets in like first-person shooters. They're just like, there's there, and it's there to like make you feel like the world is interactive, but it's really just a cookie cutter like button press. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
but
very
to be
sad.
Clear, it's possible. Things are sometimes hidden in those mouse holes or in the drawers. It's just way more often it's just sitting on the floor, and there's way too many mouse holes and drawers and desks that have nothing in it that just make it all so pointless. And yeah, I feel like I want to make this suggestion, but I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, you're just talking about making a whole different game now. But like, my thought is like, if these rooms were a little more puzzly or a little more like contextual, it's like, yeah, the baseball is in like a sporting goods store or something, like, whatever. But like, I'm thinking of it like you could make these like tiny little mini escape rooms where there's like a little puzzle or a little something you got to figure out, rather than just being totally random. It's like Spy versus Spy without the element of like the 2-player, like where I wonder where he hid the trap thing. It's just things are just randomly placed, and that takes away what I think makes Spy versus Spy cool.
Yeah, and that's like when this game describes itself as an adventure game, that's what comes to mind is are these really ridiculous ways to interact with the world in very specific ways that while it may not make sense, you may need to buy like a fake mustache to get something out of a drain pipe or something, but at least there's something going on instead of like, oh, let's just check all the drawers. Let's just brute force this.
Yeah, and for a place like Toontown, the apartment buildings are like all exactly the same and really boring, just consisting of desks and drawers that you can search through, and everybody's rooms are just like their bedroom. There's no like wacky, zany things, and yet the actual gameplay parts of it do include some cartoony like elements. I noticed that if you hit a person and then talk to them, not all the times, but sometimes they will respond, "Go away, you horrid man," because they're reacting to the fact that you just beat them up for no reason.
Reactivity.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's a nice touch for a game to have like this that otherwise has zero personality. Think about when you're walking along the streets to get from building to building. If you get run over by one of the cars, you get like, laid out like one of those bear rugs, you or Roger. Now, Roger, if he gets hit, he's fine because he's just a cartoon. So he just like unflattens himself and everything's back to normal. If you get hit by a car, you're a human being with, vital organs that are no longer intact.
I assume that just they've got a lot of little like just slapstick moments for Roger Rabbit. They're like, that's what he's there for. And also like you're there to like, maybe I'm misremembering the movie, but like maybe, or like, does this make sense that you're kind of there to protect Roger?
Yes. Yeah. You hate cartoons.
Okay.
That's the whole idea. Is like the detective hates cartoons. He, I think the story, which I'm now slightly misremembering too, but I believe his like buddy cop was killed by a toon or something like that, and that's why he doesn't trust cartoon characters anymore.
Wait, so he begrudgingly? We're just talking about the movie now. So he just begrudgingly accepts Roger Rabbit's request for help?
Well, because now he's a private detective, so it's like before he used to be on the force and everything. It's all the noir tropes,
Yeah.
But I don't think I don't think Roger Rabbit like comes to him. I don't recall exactly who comes to him. It might have been Jessica Rabbit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of just cartoon-y things that happen in this game, occasionally as you're wandering around town, a group of Judge Doom's Weasel henchmen will come up and potentially grab Roger and hold him hostage. And the only way to free him is to successfully tell the punchline to their jokes. And I can't help but feel like this is one of the best moments in the game, no matter how painful the punchlines actually are.
Yeah, it's definitely a different form of combat, if you want to call it that. This game does have combat too, but I like to think of it more as a creative solution to fights.
Yeah, it's a nice interrupter. That's one thing I will say this game is going. It's got a lot of variety, and it is funny to see all these really bad jokes come up. And I know we keep bringing it back to the movie, but does something like that happen in the movie where like they laugh so hard that everyone gets away or something, or is this just random?
I'm pretty sure that happens in the movie. Okay. Yes. The Weasels are like known for laughing, but I would even just argue that like that kind of very on the nose silliness is what the movie is known for too. And I feel like here it's executed really well because it's not just, here's an A, B, C, D thing and you just pick one of the options. You have to like cycle through potential answers and then select the one that you think matches their joke. And it just feels like it's an actual interactive moment rather than just like a forced cutscene that only happens like one time and, the joke is obvious.
You got to use your allotted toon seconds very very thoughtfully. They call them toon seconds.
Yeah, what was that? I thought when I read that in the manual, it says 9 toon seconds. I thought they were trying to make a really bad play on 19.
Oh my god!
But it's not 19; it's 9 seconds.
I don't know. I laughed at that. And I'm not sure.
Well, you see,
it's different.
Movies are filmed in frames per second, but because this was an animated movie, it was filmed in toons per second. So that was a reference to the movie as well.
That sounds contrived, but I can't tell if you're messing with
I can't tell if it's made up or not either, so I'm just not reacting.
I want to talk about the strange selection of both user interface and inputs to do things in this game, though, because we were just talking about the Weasel punchline thing, which I thought was done very well, except for I didn't know how to even see any punchlines until I realized you have to hold down select and then cycle with the D-pad through the options. It's like, why wouldn't the D-pad just work by itself? Like, why would you have to hold select? The choice of text on the menu screens at all time of like your lives are represented by these clapboards, and your power is these little P buttons, P icons, and then your strength meter is just always on the screen, even if there's like no combat necessary, but it's something that winds up like a meter for, for like a golf swing. It's very, just a strange choice of menu design elements that are just constantly around you.
Yeah, and a ton of real estate on that menu at the top is given to like just the words Roger Rabbit.
And the fact that like some of them have multiple uses, and like because the power meter is also where it tells you what you're doing, and while I think it makes sense and it's a good like workaround to have like your usable items be cycled through with like the select button, I have no idea why in a screen where you have no other anything to input for, you still have to do that in the joke phase. That was odd, but I don't think that an expert in UI UX was on staff here.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the select thing, because that was really just baffling to me too. I had to look it up, like how to change the punchlines as well, and it feels like, well, the D-pad is the best way to use this, but like this button's called select, so we have to use that somehow, or else people aren't
take everything literally.
Yeah, like I feel like it's like you just because it's called select doesn't mean it has to be the button. You have to somehow incorporate it into selecting things.
And I just want to throw it out there. We didn't mention it. We did throw LJN under the bus, but they actually hired Rare to develop this game. So this is kind of unusual that we're complaining so much about normal gameplay design elements from a company that usually we enjoy the way they think outside of the box.
I think that's a thing with LJN too, though. Like what I associate them with are like this really weird dude that just like, oh, we're gonna make it so that you can drive a car and you have full 360 control of steering, but we're not gonna let you off the train tracks, and we're gonna have Roger Rabbit follow you around, but like not really close, and it's not gonna make a lot of sense. He's just gonna kind of walk. Like that's sort of what they've been doing with, but whether it's Jaws or like all of the line of bullies that you have to throw like beer bottles at in Back to the Future. Like they're just wild and crazy ideas, and they just throw stuff at the wall, and it's kind of endearing that they have these unique ideas. It's just they never really think too much about them. So that's what I think of LJN. And this is still like we've talked about before. Like Rare doesn't really have, they haven't really proven that they have the kind of pedigree that we associate with Rare yet. So this is sort of like par for the course with them too, right?
Well, I guess I would just say that every time they've given us a game that wasn't just like a Jeopardy Wheel of Fortune thing, it's a completely different game. And this one follows that rule as well. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, for me personally, is so hard to talk about because it's unlike any of the other 222 NES games we played before it. However, I would just say that, like, while I'm not a huge fan of something like Wizards and Warriors or Slalom and stuff like that, those games are good. You know, like, they're technically impressive for the time, and I had very little to complain about. This game, it feels like it's more, like you were saying, an LJN pitched them, like, you're going to make this game for us, and here's how it's going to work. And, you know, Rare was forced to make it the way LJN wanted it. That's the only sense I could make of it.
Yeah, it follows. This definitely feels more LJN than Rare.
Yeah. And you mentioned, like, their like ambition being kind of endearing. And I like really agree with that, because like I enjoyed playing this game just purely out of, like, oh, they tried to do this and they tried to do that. You know, like, even when a lot of it doesn't work, even when, like, if I take away my, like, just my, like, the intrigue that I have about, like, what they were attempting to do, then, like, if I take away that, a lot of these things, yeah, are not fun. But, like, I just appreciate seeing all of these things that they try to do in the systems that they use to try to make it work. Like, it's kind of cool if you're interested in, like, in old games and stuff. I feel like it's just fun to kind of, like, break this game down.
Yeah, and understand what's going on under the hood.
And also just, like, the fact that bad is so much better than bland. So a lot of the games that Mike mentioned that Rare had done previously, like, yeah, they're definitely competent games, but they don't really occupy too much space in my head. Whereas I feel like I'm not gonna forget playing Who Framed Roger Rabbit because it's so weird. So yeah.
Let's go over the points of progression throughout this game. Because you're a detective trying to get to the bottom of this, the whole game is just about finding series of clues to unlock the next gated part of the game to then allow you to move forward. So the first thing you have to do is, and you will find many other things along the way, of which I can't tell you what you might specifically find because it'll be unique to your playthrough. But the first thing you need to do is find the password and the rose to get into the Ink and Paint Club. Now, you can just find just the password to get in. However, Jessica Rabbit won't talk to you unless you give her a rose, because that's how she knows that you love her or something, I suppose. So you give her the rose. Now you can talk to Jessica Rabbit. She'll give you clues to where the will is. And now the game becomes no longer about finding items, but finding pieces of the will. So you locate the pieces of the will based on the obscure hints she gives you about where the will might be. And this is a little bit where the game opens up, but ultimately it's just another batch of, okay, now instead of going into buildings and asking, is there anything in here? Now you're asking Jessica Rabbit, do you have any idea where the next piece of your will is? So I don't know if you guys want to talk about, like, you know, that part of the game, but, like, for me, it didn't actually feel like anything opened up. You know, they try to make it so, like, now you can go into the woods and go into the caves and do this and that to find the will. And it's like, I don't know, it didn't really actually seem any more exciting. I bet for them it was like that moment at the end of Final Fantasy VII, at the beginning of the end of Final Fantasy VII, where you leave Midgard. It's like, now you've got the whole world. And it's like, maybe that's what they thought Roger Rabbit was going to be like. Now you can explore outside the buildings.
No, because it doesn't change the fact that we're still just playing the bones of, like, a story. Like, they're referring to these things as pieces of the will, but it's just, you need to collect 3 key items. And, like, you have to go back and ask her, like, where's the next key item, please? And she'll tell you. And then, like, that's sort of what's going on. It doesn't feel like you're opening up because, again, there's no context to anything.
Yeah, and, like, you leave the city and you go into caves, and that's a little different because, like you said, instead of asking people what's here, you have to, like, fight a snake or something in the cave. And then you'll need, like, items, like, you might have to get, like, the spring shoes that you would have had to find somewhere else to jump over, like, a chasm or something. But then that's the new gameplay loop. Like, that one change happens, and then you do that 40 times, like looking for things, and you go and talk to Jessica Rabbit, and she gives you the clue and everything. But it's like, yeah, there's like a minor tweak to the gameplay loop that just like incorporates into the gameplay loop a little bit, but still becomes very repetitive along with everything else.
In a very like basic way, a lot of these early games attempt to be non-linear. Like I think there is a very obvious points of progression thing that I just laid out, but if you're a kid exploring this game, those things aren't incredibly obvious to you. I'm looking on game FAQs to figure out like what to do next. There was this whole like non-linear gameplay for a lot of these action adventure NES games, and then we just kind of said like that's not working. And the Super Nintendo, the N64, like for a while it was just like linear games that were very like follow the hallway style stuff. And now we're getting back to the whole like open world, do whatever you want style things that like, yeah, these games aren't open world. I'm not making an argument for Who Framed Roger Rabbit there, but I'm saying it is funny that games tried to do something very early on that they just didn't have the technology ready for yet. And I think that's the problem here, is that Rare should have found a better way to communicate like what the new gameplay flow was, rather than have it be just checking in with the same person over and over again to figure out what's the next place I have to go to. Yeah, you know, think about like Ninja Gaiden does it through like cutscenes, right? Of giving you the next bits of the story, and then you just play the exciting moments. I think Who Framed Roger Rabbit didn't need to be level based, but it certainly needed to maybe have a moment of locked, you know, cutscene footage where you see like the next moment of the story unfold and understand like, oh, okay, so now I gotta go here, you know? It would have been a little more exciting, I feel like, but they chose to make a game where you can find anything in any particular order because every time it's different.
Yeah, I think that it's more open-ended than it is open world, so yeah, you're right on that count. But I think that this game could have made a lot more sense, and they would have the ability to flesh things out a bit more if they just did away with the whole randomization. Like, you could have finding the baseball in the sporting goods store, even like, yeah, just because it would be a hand-placed item that you can put like little environmental details in, instead of everything being like a hotel hallway that people are walking around with desks and tables. Like, there would be more of an opportunity to flesh this world out, because you didn't have to worry about everything being interchangeable. And I guess that's a lesson that they're learning here, or hopefully they learned it. The industry is learning here, that unless you have unlimited resources, that this game definitely didn't have, if the wider you make something, the shallower it becomes. And this is a prime example of that.
Yeah, and like to me, it's kind of the equivalent to what we always say about enemy placement, where it's like they're doing the same problem that we have with a lot of games where like enemies just randomly appear anywhere, and it doesn't always end up being fun because it wasn't designed specifically to be fun. Whereas like this is the same thing. Like if in this case, if the developers took a little more control over where things were, it could feel a little more intentional. It can feel a little more like you solved a puzzle, rather than like you just looked everywhere because you knew the game was just like randomly generating these items. So like it's weird because I feel like we've not really, maybe we have seen things that have the same problem, but we've not really talked about that problem outside of like enemy placement. But it's kind of giving me the same vibe, and that's why I'll say that like I don't even necessarily think that this type of game doesn't work because the technology is not there, but I think that it's because the gaming industry's experience isn't there yet. Like there's not enough gaming history to draw on and like learn from the mistakes of older games. Whereas like, you know, maybe a decade down the line or whatever, when like other games are coming out, like GTA and stuff's coming out and things like that, it's like, oh, we have a good idea of what works and what doesn't, and how to kind of make this kind of thing work.
We keep mentioning that inside these buildings or just locations you go to, that there are items you pick up. There are a lot of different items to pick up. There are wallets, there's whistles, There's custard pies. There's a lot of stuff. So I don't want to like break down the power ups, if you want to call them that. At a time, was there anything you guys specifically thought was pretty unique? I'll take the obvious one here with the whistle being able to use to hail Benny the cab so that you could travel the map faster. That felt like an actual, a little bit ahead of its time, but only because we haven't had all those Japanese RPGs come over yet. They clearly took it from like those kinds of overworld games, but that feels like you're getting the airship moment where you can now explore the map a lot faster and see sections you didn't think you could see before. I like stuff like that. I'm less jazzed about like using a wallet to purchase items at a store. It's like, why would I have to give the whole wallet away just to buy things at the store?
I mean, I like that there's different classes of things. Like, yeah, there's currency, which is just wallets. Like there's no money in them, but this version of Los Angeles trades exclusively in wallets. And you've got like you said, the whistle, but then a lot of them are just glorified keys. Like you can't see in the caves unless you get the torch, and you can't jump over holes until you got the spring boots, even though the man has legs. He can obviously jump, but not until you get those. So I just see them more as keys. So a lot of it's just like little tricks like that, and not so much like really interesting interactable tools.
Yeah, and then the other things are weapons, which, like, yeah, you get like the bricks. You throw the bricks, and you'd think they would do like a lot of damage, but they don't. And then there's like a couple of things that you like lay down on the ground, and you need someone to like fall into a trap. And then there are also like a few things that you use to like lure. Like there's the cheese that you can use to like lure the mice away. And there's something else I think for like cats or something, I can't remember, but
the
bones.
Fishbone,
yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so it's like it's cool how many items there are, but it does lose its luster a little bit when you realize like, oh, there's actually just like 5 items, and then it's like, because half of them all do the same
Different
thing.
flavors of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, you were talking about the combat-based items, though, and I realized, we haven't really given the combat its due here. It's not terribly exciting, but do you want to break it down for us?
Yeah, I mean, so your main attack. So when you're confronted by one of the, what do you call them, the weasels, before you go into a building, with no weapon, your main attack is this punch. And you have to charge up your punch to get like a more powerful attack. It's a little clunky at first, but you have to, repeatedly hit the A button to charge up your attack and punch. And to be honest, I feel like that, right there at the very beginning is kind of like the most practical type of combat. But, you also just have like, yeah, you could throw a brick in like an arcing motion and try and hit him or whatever. But usually you'll get attacked and you get kind of like locked into the area until you finish the fight. Yeah, there are other little combat things if you want to consider like the cat and the dog and stuff, but actually I'm not even sure. Can you hit them?
Yeah, I feel like you can't hit them.
So yeah, it's just the weasels.
You can only lure them away with the, the various items, fish bones, meat, stuff like that. But you were talking about the punch, and I think you kind of undersold the wackiness of the punch.
Yeah, it is wacky.
With the wind up,
Yeah, it's a very cartoony, ironically, since you're not playing as the cartoon characters, that very cartoony wind up, and if you want to be moving, like, towards your enemy, you have to start that momentum before you start the wind up, and you, like, continue that momentum through your wind up. It's actually kind of an interesting little bit of a, like, mechanic, because it's not just as easy as winding up and then, like, going up to your enemy and punching. You have to kind of have a little bit of finesse to it. But I do think that it is wacky, but it's also like I could have used that like power build bar to be like maybe like 75% the length that it is, because like sometimes you got to wind up for a really long time to get that like max hit.
That makes it even more cartoony than like just how over the top it is.
That's true.
Yeah, he's winding up like he's throwing a softball pitch, and what he winds up doing is it's a release thing. So you just hold down the button and you watch him swing his arm and around and around and around, and then finally the weasel approaches you, completely like oblivious to the fact that you've been building up strength, and then you just wallop him right in the nose. And if it is the kill shot, it's funny too, because then he goes like flying up in the air, and like I appreciate that. I just wish either there were more animations for that kind of thing, like just more zany things that could happen with it, or that there was more to the fights than just like, these are the enemy targets, and just release the button when they get close enough to you.
Right.
It's not that hard to time it.
Yeah, and it feels like they added more by some of these weapons, but like the weapons really don't, at least in my experience, don't do a ton of damage. So usually like I feel like I run out of weapons and then have to start punching anyways.
Yeah, in Toontown, a pie should kill a man. Well, we could talk about the final battle with Judge Doom, but I didn't get there, and my general understanding is that it's fine because that is an incredibly tough boss battle.
Yeah. Watching a Let's Play of it, I also didn't get there. But like watching like a, Let's Play to kind of just top off my knowledge for all the for the end of the game, which I didn't finish. That final battle that this guy who's I would assume is like pretty good at this game took like 14 minutes. Like just to keep punching this guy and avoiding getting hit 3 times.
I also want to point out that this fight is another example of a just really bizarre like user interface. Like you've kind of got that whole like strength / description box being used simultaneously as and the boss's health bar, with these weird like these weird indicators moving at weird intervals. I just wanted to bring that out there. Just it keeps with the theme. It's very on brand.
No, you're right, because it's one bar where they can possibly display all the text, because God forbid they get rid of the score bar, because I know everybody's keeping track of their score.
Need to know my score at all times.
Story-based game. Right, yeah. So instead, the only other bar where they can display information, they choose to just continue to trade off between that kind of stuff. I also noticed, though, that when you do this fight, the first time you, like, kill Judge Doom, he is, like, incapacitated on the ground. You have to go pick up whatever's in, like, I guess that's a cement truck or something. You have to go pick that up, and then he, like, comes to life, and you have to be ready with that particular item and then start hitting him with that, because that's the only way to kill him. If you're like, don't know that the first time around, it would suck to die there and then have to fight him all over again.
Yeah, it feels like that's why that's there. To be like the like
gotcha,
that thing that just pisses someone off. Yeah, that gets you at the end where it's like
and Mike gets the dip cannon.
Oh, the dip cannon.
I'm not really sure what dip is, but it's referenced a lot. And I just have to imagine it's from the movie.
Is it like tobacco?
Of course, like everything else.
That's what I was thinking.
Tobacco
like
dip can. There you go. And Judge Doom does not look nearly as scary as he does in the movie. I know that gave a lot of children nightmares, because he winds up like turning into a very scary looking cartoon skeleton like thing and blowing up in size. But they spared us that animation, probably because they just couldn't do it.
So one last thing that I wanted to talk about is, we're going back a little bit, but when you meet Jessica Rabbit and you give her the rose, there's a way you can get her phone number.
Oh yeah, I read about this.
Yeah, this phone number is a number that you are meant to call in real life. And then Jessica Rabbit's voice, or whatever voice that sounds like Jessica Rabbit's voice, gives you more hints about the game.
I think that's fun.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I remember some stuff like this in the past with other like it's sort of ARG like. It sucks that it's no longer active. I think
I would have called
they should have kept it up for posterity, but
yeah, for this podcast.
Exactly. Is there a recording anywhere?
Yeah, I was gonna say at one time the number when it went down, it was taken over by like a sex hotline. So when you called that number, you got, I guess, you didn't get any kind of like Jessica Rabbit impersonator or whatever, but just like you might have thought you were talking to Jessica Rabbit, depending on who you picked up the phone. But I think that's funny that like it's a kids game from 1989, and probably as early as how long do you think they kept that number active? 2 years, 3 years? Like by the 90s, it's like now it's just kids are calling that number and getting access to porn.
Well, this is a total sidebar of this episode here, but a little fun fact that there are actually a lot of 800 numbers that went down and became sex hotlines, and there's an interesting like reason behind it. Not to plug another random podcast on our podcast, but if anyone ever listens to Reply All, they have a good episode that explains that, like, delves into the mystery of why all of these 800 numbers became sex hotlines.
Huh.
Joe, you're allowed to plug other podcasts.
Okay, good.
I didn't know that was a recent development in our world.
Yep.
On the sequels and spin-off side, obviously there's the movie, but I feel like it's also worth mentioning that the whole Roger Rabbit series began as a series of crime novels. The first novel written in 1981, Who Censored Roger Rabbit? And it is the basis for the film. But then 10 years later, in 1991, we get Who Plugged Roger Rabbit.
Plugged?
Yeah, PPP plugged.
Okay. Like,
I'm not sure what
we're talking about.
Yeah,
that's what I was wondering. Right. I'm thinking the same thing too, but maybe like back then, plug was like a slang for like, giving him like exposure.
Yeah, I guess it still is.
Like diddling.
Yeah.
Not the question is plug good or bad?
Joe just diddled Reply All.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally
exactly.
interchangeable at all times. You can.
Mm-hmm.
It means the same thing.
But that book, Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, is a soft reboot about Roger Rabbit, starring. It's like the same. Basically Roger Rabbit is going to be in a cartoon adaptation of Gone with the Wind, and this is going to be the big thing for his career. But Clark Gable now has his eyes on Jessica Rabbit, and that's not going to go over well with him. So he's trying to figure out how to stay the leading man and win Jessica Rabbit's heart over. Doesn't sound nearly as fun as the movie or the video game, for that matter. And then in 2013, the author was like, oh, I can still make money off of this if I just feel like writing more books. Like, now these people who grew up with the movie are like older and they'll buy my book. So in 2013, he wrote Who Whacked Roger Rabbit? And it's basically the same premise, but instead now Roger Rabbit's gone missing, presumably dead, and they have to try and find him, figure out who did it. But otherwise, it's the same thing.
The correct pronunciation is who done it.
Who done it instead of who did it. But maybe in that universe, they say who did it.
Sure.
Maybe they say who diddle it.
Who diddled it.
Oh, there you go. Or you could also then say who plugged it.
There you go.
Interchangeable.
Yes, I forgot about that. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is not the only video game with that same exact title. Along the same time as Rare was developing the NES game, there was a game made for the computers called Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It was released a year earlier. You actually play as Roger Rabbit, and it's mostly driving levels with Benny the Cab.
That makes sense. That's fine.
So now you're okay with a Roger Rabbit game where you play as Roger Rabbit.
I'm okay with a Roger Rabbit game where you play as Roger Rabbit if you're not trying to solve a crime.
Okay, that makes sense. I would agree with you 100% there.
Yes.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit also came to the Game Boy, but not the same game, because I would imagine that'd be a very hard type of game to port over. This is an action game with puzzle-solving elements. Roger Rabbit is still the person you play as, so once again, screw the detective. And in this one, you're in Toontown, and the main gameplay loop is going up to people that give Roger clues about where to go next. This sounds familiar. And he has to collect a variety of items in order to progress. Starting to sound like the NES game. However, when walking around the town, he is attacked by enemies and has a chance to die this time. So no car can just run him over and he gets freely back to life or whatever. This time you actually have to deal with fights and boss battles for that matter, but only as Roger. So this one doesn't pass the Sean test because it sounds like Roger is fulfilling both the Roger Rabbit and the detective role in this one.
Yeah, it sounds like bullshit to me.
Finally, in 1991, for you say DOS, right?
I say DOS.
Yeah, I wouldn't say DOS. That sounds weird.
No, it's DOS.
So for DOS and Amiga, we got Hair-Raising Havoc, in which you play as Roger Rabbit and you need to help him get out of each room that he is stuck in. So Joe, here's your escape the room style game with Roger Rabbit. And similar to what I was saying the game should be, this one is all about that first short with apparently his name is Baby Herman, but that's the 40-year-old man who just acts as a baby in the movie. And in this game, you have to try to escape each room so that you can capture Baby Herman before mommy returns home.
And, stupid question, but it is called Roger Rabbit Hair-Raising Havoc, right? Is Roger Rabbit in the title?
I don't know if Roger Rabbit's in the title, but we're going to find out in real time. Let's see. Hair-Raising Havoc. No.
That's crazy. Why would you not brand your game with the character that people recognize, which is I assume
they were able to license the likeness, but not
but not the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's on the front cover, so I guess that it's Roger. And they took the time to put Jessica Rabbit on the front cover too, because they were like sex sells, baby. So here we are with all three characters on there. And I guess they made it like a movie poster. So Roger Rabbit and Baby Herman are both billed, but they're not in the title.
Darn.
We've talked about a lot of different games, a lot of different books, a lot of different movies, but the only thing we care about is this NES game that we have been talking in depth now for a little over 50 minutes. So let's get to the bottom of this. Let's solve the mystery of whether Who Framed Roger Rabbit is an essential games list. Is it on the list?
There are no essential games in this building.
Joe, is it on the list?
Short and sweet. No, it's not on the list, but I'll say that it's interesting. It's not good. It's one of those games where it's just maybe in 1989 it would have been somewhat enjoyable because it was so unique and interesting. Now it's just interesting to see what they were going for. There's a lot of ambition in this game. It was kind of misplaced, I think, at times, but yeah, not essential, but kind of a cool piece of history, of video game history.
We're going to play over 600 NES games, and I will tell every listener that there has not been a single week, this one included, where I dread playing the game, where I'm another week, gotta learn another game, gotta slog through this. I love doing this podcast and playing these games, but this one genuinely confused me. There was a lot of just trying to wrap my head about why did they choose to do it this way? Was there anything else made like this at the time? It's such a weird game where sure, Back to the Future was also a weird movie adaptation game, but this one made me realize I might not even be equipped or ready to talk about something like this because it just requires 30 plus years of playing this game to truly understand it. You guys probably know Who Framed Roger Rabbit a lot better than the three of us just did on this episode. However, it also made me think about just how thankful I am that we don't get just every movie gets an adaptation for a video game now. That was happening for so long. I remember at one point I heard that Batman Begins got like a PlayStation 2, Xbox video game adaptation, and I've never sought out video game footage for it. I've never like looked at a preview of it. I just wonder, what is that game like? Like, that's a Christopher Nolan film that now has a video game, and that's the same thing here. Like, this is a Robert Zemeckis movie that now has like a video game that is just a very obtuse way of exploring the same kinds of thing that like the movie does so well. So in some ways, yeah, it's not like the worst game I've ever played on the NES. Yes, it is a confusing game. No, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's almost worse because the movie is so good. Like, if that makes any sense, Back to the Future had like the same thing going for it, where you're like, that's a timeless movie now. Like, that's one of the classics, and the game sucks so much that it like hurts to play it. And it hurt me to play Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a game where I am not Roger Rabbit, a game where I am solving a mystery that just involves finding things that just happen to be on the floor for whatever reason. Like, they're not hard to find. I'm sure if we just, called the police force, they'd be able to, send the whole crew out and find these things in an hour. But here I am, wasting my freaking time trying to do it over the course of several hours on an NES game I barely understand. And so for that reason, no, not on the essential games list.
I just want to state real quick that, for the record, I never played it, but apparently the Batman Begins PS2/Xbox game, or PS3, whatever, wasn't that terrible. Or so.
But isn't that just crazy? Like, the fact that they even made one, imagine if they went even further and made a Dark Knight video game. Like,
I'm
what
actually
would that
surprised
be?
they didn't. I don't know. It's an action movie.
As far as movies, video game adaptations of movies go, any Batman movie makes more sense than more than half of them that exist.
I'm hoping, I kind of wish that in an alternate universe we got like a You've Got Mail PS1 game.
Yeah, where's the Social Network video game? Where's my Zodiac video game?
Now there's a mystery.
That was also 2 Fincher films. See, we had 2 Zemeckis films, 2 Nolan films, 2 Fincher films. All things are good with doubles. Doubles are good. Triples are best.